Welcome, everyone. Today we're going to be interviewing Leon Ruri, the founder of Haka For Life, an initiative that uses the traditional Maori haka to empower young men, particularly those battling depression. Growing up in New Zealand, Leon moved to Australia and saw the need to support Maori abroad through cultural connection. Since its inception in 2017, Haka for Life has organized events such as a performance on Sydney Tower Eye for International Men's Day, with a commitment to generate awareness and support for the unique mental health issues facing men and Indigenous people. Leon's personal journey through difficult circumstances in his youth and his dedication to cultural heritage drive his mission to help others find strength and community. We look forward to an inspiring interview with a real difference maker. Leon, welcome.
Thank you, Brother Seamus. It's an absolute honor and a pleasure to be able to join you this morning. I just want to start too by acknowledging you and thank you for this opportunity to have this interview and create this conversation today. But I want to just acknowledge that I'm on the lands of the Wurundjeri people on the east coast of Australia in the Melbourne region. I just want to acknowledge all First Nations peoples and tribes here in Australia, which is the land that I now call home. I've recently moved from the west coast of Australia, which is the Perth or the Boorloo area, as the Noongar people call it. Noongar people are the traditional owners of the Perth area, or the southwest of Western Australia. And I just want to acknowledge my tribal connections back to Aotearoa, New Zealand, being Tūhoe on my dad's side and Tainui as well. And I just acknowledge everybody that's going to join us for this interview today. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for acknowledging that. Let's just start with, what is Haka for Life in your own words? What's the commitment of Haka for Life?
The commitment of Haka for Life in the world is to interrupt conversations that might keep people captive about who they are and what it is that they deal with in life. I created Haka for Life out of a landmark project, the SELP program. It was an idea and a concept that I had a vision about actually for many years when I visited a place called Kings Park in Perth on Anzac Day. Anzac Day is a special day in Australia. It commemorates actually the sad battle that took place with Australian and New Zealand troops in Turkey many years ago. And when I visited this place on April the 25th, it was about 2009, I saw this vision of me doing a haka with all of these men at this place that just come out of nowhere. And I thought, man, what's this about? And then years later, I would go on to be able to create Haka for Life, with what I called the Anzac Day Haka for Life, which was the use of an expression of our Indigenous Māori art of haka to express ourselves. And I opened that day and that opportunity up to people from all different nations and colours and creeds and whatever it is that that anybody was. And from there, Haka for Life was born. It took on a life of its own. And from that, I've created the opportunity for us to have conversations about our mental health and well-being, about culture, about supporting First Nations peoples, Indigenous peoples, wherever they be. But ultimately, for me, Haka for Life is an interruption and a self-belief that you don't necessarily have to be Māori or be someone that does the physical form of haka, but a Haka for Life is a stand for life, is a conversation of life. I would call this conversation today a Haka for Life. We're standing for life to create a vibration of conversations, reflections, and opportunities to see and to see and learn that we could be whatever it is we choose to be, or that we can overcome the things that at times keep us captive.
Well, let's talk about the haka. Haka's become rather well known in the last 20 or so years, and with a lot of things with global culture, things can be co-opted. And if somebody plays rugby and they're a fan of rugby, they know the All Blacks do the haka before their games. But the haka goes back; it's ancient. And what do people want to know about what it means to the Maori people?
Yeah, well, great question. A conversation or a korero, as we say in our language, a conversation or a talk that I had with an uncle of mine when I started Haka for Life. As part of our Indigenous cultural protocols, elders are a huge part of our culture, and going to tap into their knowledge, to seek their knowledge and guidance is something that I did. And he shared with me, a conversation around haka being that the first ever haka was actually, in fact, created by women. and that haka is childbirth. When birth is given, there's a haka that takes place. The stand, the giving and the birthing of life, the different emotional expressions, physical expressions that you go through, is akin to the haka. So haka was in fact born by women. Now, I suppose in a modern day or in a pre-modern day sense, it was actually used in battle as well. In battles against different tribes as a form of expression of intimidation. It was definitely, and I say this intentionally, was definitely back in those days, done as a war dance or as a war declaration, either at the beginning of battles or to in fact stop a battle, purely through the art and the expression of intimidation. Because if people have ever experienced different types of haka, and there's many different types of haka that tell different stories. Some of them are extremely, extremely intimidating. And as it's sort of molded into modern day, Seamus, what we've seen is that sort of transformed from it being at times just a direct declaration of wars, which for us Māori living here in Australia was something that we had to speak to, because of the fact that the Indigenous peoples of these lands knew that it was a war dance, and at times when we're doing war on their country, they're asking the question, why are you declaring war against us as a people? What have we done? But it's not an actual fact used directly as a war analogy or a war intention. It's actually used for an expression of love, appreciation, of acknowledgement, of remembrance. And so it's sort of transformed in ways. Not to say that there's not times when haka is used to declare war on something. As an example, I've declared a war on suicide through the expression of haka, because I believe that it's the most powerful expression that I can use as a Māori man and us as Māori to be able to express ourselves. Today, we've seen through the empowerment of our people, through activists, through a huge commitment of culture from our whānau, from our families, from our tribes back in New Zealand, we're seeing our culture really, really grow. And the generations like more so probably like my mum and dad and myself especially, where we didn't have that opportunity to learn te reo Māori or to speak our native tongue so much because of all of the policies that were in place by governments to try and remove it, to try and extinguish our language. What we're seeing now is, the commitment of those that did hold on to our language and keep it and empower it is starting to grow now, where haka is growing immensely, and you're seeing this expression of haka right across the world. And a beautiful part of what's really growing our culture is, in fact, like you refer to, the All Blacks. They're the most successful team in world sport. That's a fact. I'm not sure if you know that, but and that's because they've been consistently dominant in that particular sport for over the past 100 years. And through them embracing our Indigenous culture and sharing the art of haka, it's really, really grown the awareness and the impact and the effect of haka. But what also makes it so effective, Seamus, is the fact that they honour it too. It's the honour and the intention that they have towards the expression of haka for us as a people. And I think it's a great example of what happens in a positive manner when people embrace Indigenous cultures, and certainly that's, for us as Māori people, we've benefited from the growth of our culture worldwide.
The haka connects people to something. There's two threads I want to explore. The haka connects people to something. I'm not Māori, but I've seen quite a few hakas, and every time I feel like I'm connected to something. And how I would describe what I experience being connected to is honor. Just honoring others.
Yeah.
And around the world, people are, in North America, we had, like Australia, children taken from their communities and culturally isolated, and basically having their culture replaced with the dominant culture. And it probably is known, maybe not well known as it should be, but there's a lot of social and psychological illness that results in just really being separated from that. And one of the things that Haka for Life is concerned for is connecting Maori people abroad with their culture. what would you say the Haka provides for them or evokes for them?
Yeah, actually, a great question too. Because one of the things that I learned, we went to North America a couple of years ago to teach a whole bunch of American men at Santa Monica Beach, actually, to teach them the haka. And I remember that we made an intention of ours out of respect for the First Nations people there in Southern California. We met with the Tonga people. We've got a brother Kevin Lone Wolf Nunez, who's the gatekeeper of the canyons of Southern California. There, he's a brother for life for us. But I remember that we got to go to their tribal meeting and got invited there, and they said to us distinctly, "Thank you for bringing your medicine to our lands." And that they saw that haka for them was a medicine, and it's certainly something that I took on from that point of life. Specifically to say, actually, it is a medicine. I love doing haka because it's good for my mental well-being. It's good for my wairua, for my spirit to be able to uplift me, and what it means, from a mental health aspect, even from a physical health aspect, is that it is a medicine for us, not only for us as Māori people, but it's a medicine for all peoples. And I believe that the reason why it is a medicine is because of our ability to be able to be so powerfully self-expressed in that moment. There's so many people that are holding on to rage, so many people that are holding on to frustrations and letdowns in life, that they never really having the opportunity these days to fully express themselves. We've got so much conformities in life and expectations sort of societally that it's hard to be just to be at times, whether that's a man or a woman, or if we're using pronouns, whatever it is that you choose to be. But for us, it's our life source. It's a connection to a culture that we love, that we believe that we are the kaitiakis, the caretakers of, the upholders of a form of expression that's been given to us from the spiritual realm in the physical realm. And as you rightly say, I've been able to do many, many haka, and so many people come and share the same experience, of saying, I've never felt what I felt in my body when you were doing the haka. When we did the haka to the Tonga people, so many of them came and said, my goodness, the goosebumps in my body, I just never had that feeling ever. They didn't realize that they could get connected to that. And an important piece of us when we're doing the haka is to know that that's the ihi, that where we're connecting life force to life force. So it's always our intention, when we're doing haka, you never do a haka half-hearted or anything like that. It's always done as a full expression of acknowledgement, challenging, or whatever it is that we choose that intention of that haka to be.
So, let's talk about the connection between the Haka and impacting mental health. You said that you declared war on suicide, and for people who may not be familiar, there are higher instances per capita of mental illness and suicide among Indigenous communities, particularly people that have had a break in their culture, connection to their culture of origin. And that would be true around the world. But you're not a mental health professional, and you're not claiming to, do that work. But what would you say that connection that you were just talking about does to getting people started on a road to dealing with underlying issues?
Yeah, what I'd say to that is that I can only speak from my Indigenous point of view with haka particularly, but I'll just want to use a bit of research, scientific research, actually out of the Adelaide University in Australia here, which has actually said that physical movement, or the implementation of a physical movement structure inside of any well-being plan for yourself is up to 1.5 times more effective than medication. And that's not to dismiss people that are on medication or need medication. I've been on antidepressants myself at a time in my life. But what it does, especially with haka, is it's so powerful because of the movement and the self-expression that comes with it. There's a physical transformation that takes place and a chemical reaction that's taking place that has a positive impact in your well-being. I know many times when we've gone to events and gone to different areas to be able to do haka, that the people that have come to do a haka have needed to haka. to be able to clear themselves out. It's like going outside, I suppose, and screaming at the world, to get your frustrations out because people don't do it. As a game, we're so societally conditioned that that's inappropriate to be angry or to express ourselves. It makes me think of a lady that I did inner child work with, an old English lady in Perth, and she often takes people out into the bush with a huge stick and gets them to beat it into the ground to get their frustrations out. Because, as we know, on a DNA level, is that we can, the intergenerational DNA of trauma, and that can be transferred. And, we don't want to be holding on to these frustrations and angers. So the medicine of Haka allows me to be able to express myself and to clear my mind, to open my senses, to actually physically feel good after it as well too. So, and I would encourage that would be present for any Indigenous cultures, because when you have a look at Indigenous cultures around the world, lots of them have the ceremonial dance as a key part of their cultures. And I believe that that's a medicine for the lands of every person that lives on lands that have Indigenous cultures. And that's why I believe so passionately, not because Indigenous people are better than non-Indigenous people, but because of the fact that we have protocols that are literally tens of thousands of years old that have remained in existence, and that are such an important piece to the well-being, of each country and each lands that we live on.
Well, yeah, you point to something I think is, it's very relevant. There's displacement happening today, and Indigenous practices evolved and were refined over centuries and tens and tens and tens of generations. And then there's a interrupting trauma. And there's interrupting trauma happening for people right now as we speak. And, you also alluded to how that trauma gets passed on to the next generation and the next generation and kind of gets encoded. Where do you see the Haka for Life going from here? Just what's happened in the Middle East, what's happened in the Ukraine, what's happened to, people in different parts of the world that have, experienced the dominant culture persecuting them. Like, is Haka something that you're going to give to the world?
Yeah. Well, look, I think it's a twofold thing there. My answer is, definitely the Haka is a form of expression that we can use as Māori people to share with the world. But in any land where there are Indigenous people, it is for us to go and this is my personal point of view, is if I was going to their lands to share and to stand with Haka as a contribution to their cause, to whatever it be, is that I would be doing a Haka to empower them to connect and to light their Indigenous cultures up. So many people are fascinated by the Haka, and they love the Haka from us as a people, as Māori people. But our minds and our hearts are always to acknowledge the lands of those peoples that we visit, and especially when they've got Indigenous cultures there, it's to activate and to keep them alive. That's our contribution, not only as a physical stand and a physical presence to say, hey, we stand and support you, but it's also to encourage and to uplift for them to activate their Indigenous peoples. So, and us being able to go and express ourselves through Haka, the encouragement behind all of those things, whether it be to encourage Indigenous peoples or not, is also to send a physical message to governments and powers that be that want to commit acts against all races and cultures that are there, that may be an intention to extinguish. We look at when you talk about stuff like Palestine and the genocide that's happening there. We look at Ukraine, the invasion that's happening in those lands. And it's really to say to governments, organizations, or people that are perpetrating evil, is to say that there are good people here that'll stand for the cause of humanity.
Well, let's talk about your commitment to men's mental health. Before we started, you and I were just chatting a little bit about, I was sharing, my observation that the culture of being a man, and what young men are trained to be, the world has changed while they're growing up. And it's, there's phenomenon like, for example, in the United States, uh, fewer men are going to college, and they're not performing in school as well as girls. And you might say, oh well, maybe it's always been that way, but there are mental health issues that men are facing around the world that, uh, I think will at least correlate with this societal shift we've experienced in the last 50, 60 years.
Yeah, look, hey, it's interesting that you're talking about that because I just commented about something online to do within New Zealand around the curriculum that exists sort of worldwide from an educational point of view. I believe that a lot of the reason why boys or men, young men, even adult men are struggling in those settings is because I think that the structure of the education system needs to be restructured. It's as we know for a lot of, and a prime example is my two sons. I've got two sons. They really, really struggled in school academically. You put a piece of paper and a pen in front of them, and they're like cats on a hot tin roof. They just don't want any part of it. They don't have the ability at this stage in their life, and I say that intentionally, Seamus, because I was very, very similar growing up. I just couldn't keep still. We look at things today like ADHD and all of those sorts of mental illnesses that absolutely exist. Is that I think we have to change up the manner in which we're trying to engage people and connect with people in those settings. Now, I'm not saying to dismiss totally the education system, but there are definitely formats and ways of connecting with people that are ineffective. And especially around boys, we've got to find different ways of being able to stimulate them, to have them focus, whether we like it or not. The current structure of the world is that there's a particular sort of system that we have to connect to in a manner in which we sort of make a living, make our way, be successful in life. I'm not entirely against any of those sorts of things, but particularly critical of the manner in which we're stimulating or trying to educate people from a systematic structure that's been in existence for years that needs to now transform. It's just not effective. A case in point example in a lot of the work that I do is that I see, I go and facilitate, I talk to lots of groups of people. And a huge part of what I see today that is still in existence in relation to how we connect with people is that they use a lot of PowerPoint presentations. And I believe that the art of communication, exactly like we're doing, is being lost in the manner in which people communicate in life. So we're no longer as effective as we are in communication. And the impact and the effect then on people is that they're reluctant to engage in conversation. They're reluctant to talk. They feel that they can't express themselves or open up or articulate what it is that they need to articulate. So we're finding the way that they communicate is through things like text messages or through PowerPoint presentations, when we're missing the art of communication, of being able to express ourselves. Now, what makes this so effective, this face-to-face stuff, this is the stuff that truly stimulates us. So this would be no good being done if I'm talking to a PowerPoint presentation, reading all the answers to the questions that you're asking. In the same sense, we're looking at an educational structure and where we've got people in classrooms and whatnot, they might have to change it to doing some of those classes outside as a stimulant. They might have to look at physical exercise structures before they engage people. I do work in schools, and one of the things that I've seen that is effective for kids, particularly Indigenous kids, because they're very physical. They love hand-eye coordination is great. They love doing physical things, as we all do, but particularly with Indigenous kids. So I'll have them do things like a physical running exercise or play basketball or do something. And that's literally to exert the energy from them, to get them all connected so that I can then have their listening in a particular place where I can then connect with them. So that's why I think it's important for us to change, some of the structure in the world these days to accommodate, not only men, but also women too, that struggle with that type of setting.
You mentioned at the beginning that you created Haka for Life while participating in you used an acronym, but the full name of the program was Self-Expression and Leadership Program, which is about creating a project that makes a possibility real in the world. And I'm curious how your participation in landmark programs how it comes into play in your work.
Oh, hey, the landmark work, me doing firstly the landmark forum altered the trajectory of my life. I am distinctly clear about that. And I don't say that because anybody's paid me to say this. I don't say anything that I don't want to say at all. I'm saying that because up until that time in life, I had a particular story about myself and a whole lot of examples in life of failures, of things that I deemed were failures. And when I was a 40-year-old man, when I got introduced to the Landmark Forum, it absolutely altered the way that I saw myself, firstly, and then the way that I saw the world and the way that I could contribute to the world. In doing this self-expression leadership program, I'd always, had an idea about being able to impact people in a positive way, but I just didn't know how to go about doing it. And what I learned from that is they taught me the structure and the plan and that about how to go about that, how to implement it, how to reflectively look at myself. From there, I went and done other programs that Landmark had, particularly the team management leadership program for me, altered everything. It was like SELP on steroids. And what it distinctly taught me about was communication distinctions. So I spoke with you briefly earlier about ones that I've never forgotten, that I live by every day, is communication, me to others, others to me, and particularly others to others in communication. And what I know and understand is that if I can master the manner in which I communicate to people, the power and effect of me then creating a conversation like this one has the ability to reach people and to reach places and spaces which I could never have ever imagined. And so what I do every single day, and especially in every single engagement, is things that I've learned, particularly about engaging with groups of people, because I fly around Australia and I engage in workplaces all over the country and corporate rooms and with individuals, is about shaping the listening. This is something that I really, really learned from Landmark's work, was about shaping the listening inside of a room. And what I mean by that is that as you know, people come with their different stories in life, different experiences. So our listening is not necessarily all the same. We're listening through filters, and those filters of life have been our experiences quite often. And people even now, they'll be making sense of what I'm sharing and saying, that it makes sense. They'll either agree with it, they might disagree with it, they might be unsure about it, and others will evolve into, bringing up their summation at the end of this conversation as to whether it was effective. But what I saw through that is that if I can shape the listening in the room with people and be able to connect them, and what I've learned is to be able to do that many different ways. As I said, sometimes it's a physical exercise to get them connected. Sometimes it's a reflective exercise. Sometimes it's a breathing exercise to be able to do that, Seamus. But one thing that I distinctly know from the work that I've done here is that if I cannot shape or transform or recreate the listening in a room to be in line with the vibration that I'm creating, then it's likely that I'm not going to be as effective as my intention wanted to be. And so I always work on connecting rooms of people, connecting people so that we've got a clear understanding about what it is that I'm trying to say or what it is that we're about to do.
Well, the thing I really hear in what you're saying is also that you really listen to who you're speaking to.
Yeah, that's probably been the biggest transformation, actually, of all of the work that I've done. It's not, and I said we focus on the articulation of communication, but the listening, my listening is, I'll confidently say it's next level. I've had it said by people that, how are you able to hear those things? We can't even hear them. And I've learned on the journey, that sometimes when you hear things, you see things. Your listening causes you to actually see it. Sometimes when you see it, you'll hear it. And that's the analogy that I've used. I'm so connected. And this is the part where I'm so grateful about my Indigenous cultures, that particularly as Māori, is that we're very connected to vibration and people's body language and all of that. It's in our DNA as warrior people. You have to be able to read situations and scenarios. And so that part of my DNA that's been passed on to me is I'm always connected to what's happening in a room. For me, as a Māori person with warrior DNA, I'm not intimidated to be inside of any room. And where that makes that positively effective, Seamus, not in the sense that we're not going in there to battle with anything in that room physically, but it has me not be intimidated in a setting that could be uncomfortable for people. So I'm able to then connect to what it is that's happening in that room and to be able to listen and then be able to transform it from there.
Well, and the thing I hear in what you said is, when, not being intimidated allows you to see opportunities that you would miss if you were being intimidated. Opportunities to contribute, opportunities to make a difference.
Yeah, because so many people we're so stuck in our head. And again, when I look at the things that I've learned from the landmark, a great friend of mine, Rob Derry, always said to me that the worst neighborhood that you can hang out in is here. And we're always, the practice is to bring ourselves out here, literally where we are. The power of talking, the power of expressing ourselves is so important. So, when we're in those rooms, whether it be a room of people that we're talking to, it might be just a conversation that we're resisting having with a loved one, with an intimate partner, with a work colleague, whoever it be. Is that so often we're just so stuck in here, so stuck in our head, and instead of being able to come out here and to talk. And the encouragement is to always have people express themselves. Today we use an expression about creating safe spaces. It was sort of something that I was resistant to in the initial stages of hearing it, because I'd always say, well, you're implying that the space is unsafe, but I now get the context of it, is that it's important that when people don't feel safe, they feel unsafe. And particularly when we're talking about mental health or anything for that matter, it might be something with people's ideas. One of the other things that I do in life is I create events and, have conversations with people about business ideas and whatnot that they might have, is that if you can create a space for them where they feel safe, being able to express and open themselves up, then that brings forth the opportunities for conversations that you never thought were going to happen.
I want to ask you a different question. The last couple of questions I want to ask you, one of them is, what is your measure for being successful with Haka for Life?
What is great question. One of the measures, in actual fact, is after I created Haka for Life in 2017, I created the world's first corroboree in Haka. Corroboree on the west coast of Australia, on Noongar country, is the Indigenous dance form, the Indigenous people, which we created that for Anzac Day. Currently, as we have it in Australia, the ceremonial art forms of corroboree and Haka are not included in Anzac Day. Now, Anzac Day stands for the Australia-New Zealand Army Corps. It's the most significant day on the calendar, which is April the 25th every year that takes place. Since 2018, I've been a huge advocate for the inclusion of corroboree and Haka in Anzac Day. And I am determined, before I leave this earth, to ensure that the Indigenous cultures of Australia and New Zealand are represented on that day, because of the contribution of our peoples to particularly World War I, which it initially commemorates. A lot of those Indigenous soldiers here in Australia, and even Māori soldiers in New Zealand, were not treated the same way as the non-Indigenous. They were not gifted and given parcels of land. They were not acknowledged for their heroics in the war. And they were quite often given roles where they were in the front line, which meant extinction, which meant that they weren't coming home, particularly because of the ways that war was fought back then. On August the 1st here in Australia, I've got a meeting with a federal minister for the Veterans Affairs of Australia. He wants to sit down and listen to a proposal about including corroboree and Haka in Anzac Day services. For me, that would be a measure of success for Haka for Life.
Right.
That'd be one of the measures of success. The other part is to increase our footprint and to grow our footprint. That, for me, outside of Perth, I'm in Melbourne on the East Coast, intentionally to be able to grow Haka for Life. I want to grow it around the world, and that'd be a measure of success for us. But also, one of the things that may be immeasurable is just to be able to cause a conversation in people's minds and in their hearts to be a stand for life. Firstly, the most important stand is being a stand for themselves, which again undoes all the conditioning and the societal conditioning that we've been taught, no matter where we are, is that we firstly think of others. And if you were to think of yourself, it's a negative context to think of yourself. It's a selfish context. Quite often you'll hear people express themselves, oh, look, selfishly, I put myself first. what I've learned in life, Seamus, is that the most important person that we can impact is ourselves, firstly. For me to be effective anywhere in the world, be it on this conversation that we're having or anywhere that I might inject myself in life, is that I firstly have to make sure that I'm in the right state of mind, physically, mentally, and emotionally. So for me, another measure of success would be that side of things, of actually having people connect to Haka for Life and knowing that the way that we do and create things leaves people a particular way. Seamus, it's always our intention, no matter what I'm creating with our teams and whatnot, as we have conversations about that, and the vibration of those conversations are created just like this, but the intention of what we want people to feel and to distinctly go away from our events or our conversations with, and the intention is to always have them reflectively look at those moments in time. Hey, am I okay? Is there things that I can improve? And all of these things are done without, self-criticism and without being negative to self at all. It's just the look, and this is what I've learned in my journey as well too, is that there are things where I've learned about myself that when I'm in my lane and doing what it is that I do and what I'm born to do, I'm as good as the best people in the world at it. And then there are other aspects in my life where I'm the complete opposite of that. And instead of being self-destructive to myself and condescending and saying that I'm a failure, I'm not good enough, I'm not all of these things, what I've realized is that I've just got work to do in those other areas. And some of that work is at times calling on friends like you. Hey, that means I've got to go get a friend to help, or I've got to, find other forms of help, not stay stuck here in my mind. And, for me, as someone that suffered sexual abuse as well, one of the things that I learned from sitting down with my psychologist is that that's an impact and effect of sexual abuse too for people like myself, where you internalize things because externally you don't want anybody to get in trouble, or you don't want anybody to think, because you've been conditioned that way since a kid to think that there's anything wrong. But behind that, really, you're internally imploding. So, the encouragement through the conversation that I have here or with anybody that we connect or create with is to go away empowered, with a self-belief, and two, with a form of self-love, where they're being gentle with themselves. It's so much easier for us to be kind to other people, yet we don't offer the same kindness to ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I really believe that if we can transform that side of ourselves, it will be a greater contribution to humanity.
I want to finish our conversation with one question. You might need to think about it for a moment, but what do you want people to say about you when you're no longer here?
What do I want them to say about me?
I'll make it a little
Hey,
easy.
that I was a kind, loving human being, really, for my children. My daughter's on here. I could see my daughter's here. I want my children to be proud of their dad. To see that me as a person, I've been through my shit in life, mate. I haven't always showed up as the best person in life, but one of the things that I've done, especially since creating Haka For Life, is I've just got a determination about myself to transform the way that I am as a man, to show up, but to go out into the world and to be an example to people that have no self-belief, that believe that they're a failure, that believe that they've got nothing to offer humanity, to see me as just a man that had countless examples of not showing up as the best expression of myself in life, being able to transform those things and being able to take ownership of the areas that I've needed to, and to be able to see that you can contribute in life. And that's what I'd love people to remember me as, and someone that stood for people. I'm not afraid to stand. That's definitely one thing about me. I'll stand where people don't stand. I'll have the conversations that people, don't want to have in life, for the greater good of humanity.
Well, I really thank you for being with us today, Leon, and I really thank you for the enormous commitment you have to your community and to all of us.
Thank you, Seamus. I want to acknowledge to all of. I know that this is a conversation that we're talking about my work in the world, but I just want to acknowledge and thank Landmark for this opportunity, And I particularly want to put a shout out to all of the graduates in Australia and New Zealand. I know people that are watching that may not have done any landmark works, might not know but what that is, but it's people that complete the landmark forum. And I want to acknowledge them because even in creating the Haka and the corroboree, it was done with landmark graduates. The amount of people that have contributed to transforming me, man, I was not the man that I get to be, on conversations like this or in settings around this country and around the world. Had it not been for people in life that may never do the things that I do, may never have the levels of courage that I have in particular spaces, but they contributed to me in ways that have been able to, shape and transform, and then to be able to create opportunities like this, to have conversations with people like yourselves, and, to hopefully impact people that listen here and reflectively go away and go, hey, man, if he can do it, I can do it, and that's definitely possible. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Leon. And it really was an awesome talk, Leon. Really well done. All right, my friends. We will see you on the next one. But thank you.